Okay. Wednesday edition of the After Show. Got Wink and Justice with you. Wink over here on the East Coast.
And Justice over here on the West Coast of the contiguous United States of America. It is Wednesday's Child is full of whoa Wednesdays on the After Show. You know, we were going to call it Germanic Mercury.
Yeah.
But you know what they say? One cannot live on Greek and Roman gods alone, at least not in America. You got to put in a little bit of the Nordic ones, too.
Yes.
Then you got that triumvirate. Yes. Enough of that. Hey, Wink, how are you doing?
Not bad, not bad. It is 45 degrees, so it's back to normal. You know, that 65 stuff is, you know, it's just had a couple days of that, but we're back to reality and 45 degree weather, which is kind of normal for this time of year. So we'll take it, and it's not bad. It's semi-sunny out there, so not raining. Reminder, get in the chat. Just go to netrootsradio.com. Scroll down the bottom of the page, and on the right-hand side of the bottom of the page, there is a link to the chat. So click that. Join us there.
And to the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage are the contribute donate buttons. And thank you for your generosity. We're still in need to upgrade hardware and the attendant software. Isn't that I don't know. It's almost like planned obsolescence, Wink.
Yeah, pretty
You know, they make
much,
things to last only for a little bit. You know, God. You know, I am fortunate to live in a state where I get to see a lot of, you know, what I call real pickups. You know, None of these giant things made out of plastic, but, you know, real pickups like, you know, a 67 Chevy long bed 3/4 ton.
Love it. Yep.
With the 1-ton axle and the tow package. Okay?
Right.
And so
none of the suburban stuff. Yeah.
Those engines are still running. And if you take care of the body, it's strong as all get out. 3 tanks, 2 over the back wheels, and then, you know, then a saddle, then one behind the back seat. And when I had my 67 Chevy 3/4 ton long bed with 1-ton axle and tow package, I could drive from LA to San Francisco without ever stopping for gas when I filled up all 3 tanks.
There you go.
Of course, I have to admit, at that time, gasoline was, you know, we were shocked when it went over $1 a gallon.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
Yep.
Remember when it went from like 22 cents and it jumped to like 34 and how outrageous that was and it caused people to line up for blocks and every gas station was like sold out. They didn't have any gas because, you know, people are hoarding gas, right? Just from going from 22 cents to 34 cents.
Yeah.
Teaches you. Well, oh my God, Wink, here along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, it is currently 48 degrees. It looks like we're going to be low 50s, mid 50s. It's not raining now, though we do have a forecast of rain, and as it should be. So, you know, I was thinking about literally your neck of the woods. James Fenimore Cooper placed The Last of the Mohicans in that landscape.
Yep.
And it was also during a little ice age.
Yep.
I mean, we know it now as a little ice age.
Right. Back then, not so much. But yeah, today we do, yeah.
So I was just thinking, you know, I don't know how confusing it would be. You get like, you know, a couple hundred years or 70, 80 years of, you know, like an ice age. And then it gets all balmy, almost tropical.
Right.
Know? I think it's going to change your cultural determinant and view of the world. I know it would for me. Speaking of which, these are the issues that we're attending to today because we have Angie Marks coming up at the bottom of the hour. Montana Republicans insist that vote by mail gives the Democratic Party an unfair advantage in this upcoming special election there. Now, of course, it was a Republican because, well, first of all, a little quick background is that Ziski, whatever the guy is, you know, from Montana, went to work for Trump in the interior, right? Run the interior. So they got to fill that seat. And it being such a small state, you know, they don't have enough money for another election. So a Republican said, you know, the cheapest thing that we can do is mail. And everybody goes, you know what? You're right. And then somebody from Alec, I don't know, somebody said, wait a second. Did you say vote for by mail? You mean just anybody can vote? You, and now they're trying to stop it. It's just, isn't it typical, Wink?
Yeah.
Let's see. This is sadly appropriate now, but the recent California school shooting is part of a disturbing trend where women are disproportionately likely to be murdered at that workplace by an intimate partner. Yep. But let's not call that terrorism. I don't know. You know, it does kind of crack me up. The cops in San Bernardino are still saying, well, we're trying to figure out a motive. I go, well, wait a second. The guy has a long history of domestic violence, not against this woman. They were just recently married, but previously pistol whipping people. I mean, a long history of this violence, and you're trying to figure out a motive. And then I think, now what like industry has a high incidence of what we used to call wife beaters? Could they be wearing badges? I don't know. That's for another story or another day and another look at it, because we also have to mention that a Mexican journalist's nightmarish case reveals disturbing changes to asylum policy under Trump. Criminalize the asylum seekers, Wink.
Huh.
Kind of gives you sort of like an understanding when it was so hard for Sean Spicer to stand up there yesterday to just shut up because he kept revealing this underlying ethos. Because, first of all, don't ever compare things to Hitler. It's only going to get you in trouble. We all know that. There used to be a term through the Overton window, you know, any number of things, right?
Right.
The problem is that, well, I'm sorry. I just that during Passover and it just Sean Spicer. So the underlying ethos is that Assad is bombing innocent people, but apparently the Jews were not innocent people if they were people at all. Get it? I know I do. And, of course, we get to visit with Angela Marx, also known as Angie in Washington State, for a discussion. Well, it's going to be more than just this, and we might, wander into other areas that are all intersected. Trust me. But we're going to have a discussion on ICBM flight times from the Korean Peninsula to the west coast of the United States of America. Yeah, we sent a carrier attack group into, the Sea of Japan. Some people are calling it the Korean Sea. No, come on. If you're going to be in
the Sea of Japan, I don't know. I don't get it.
Because it's in Imperial Japan.
Yeah,
named it that way. Come on. All right. Budget director Mick Mulvaney crashes through the glass ceiling of evil. And if you tell the Chinese president you are bombing Iraq when you mean Syria, you better have some rose water in that chocolate cake. What? All that, plus the Connect, Unite, Act, Daily Co's community calendar, and more. There's always more here on the After Show with that ever so fine fellow over on the East Coast with his very subtle but effective East Coastal elitism, and his name is Wink. When I say effective, because he votes.
Yeah,
and you can't be more of an elite when you're a liberal that votes. Yeah. And I'll mention again, his name is Wink. And this guy all the way back over here on the West Coast, and I don't need to tell you about my elitism. Can't you smell it? Ew. And my name is Justice, and we do this 5 days a week for an hour-ish in this particular specific and peculiar tear in the fabric of space-time because, well, who loves your baby? At some point, Wink, this shtick is going to be like, it's going to be like, for a sub-market of essentially a dying breed of people who will not ever be able to pass on the wonder and beauty of Kojak and Columbo.
Exactly.
Oh, man. First death came for the greatest generation, and there's hardly any of those left. I mean, you know, in our lifetime, Wink, I remember reading stories of like the last guy from the Civil War. You know, he was like 12 or 13, you know, when he was fighting the Civil War.
Right.
You know, it's maybe 110 or whatever, right?
Right.
I remember when he died off, and I thought, wow, man. Now you can hardly find anybody who fought in World War II.
Right.
They were practically all gone.
Although I see one or two a month, my place of business, but they are up there. They're probably 89, 90 somewhere.
No, they're in their 90s, well in their 90s. You know, there were a few 15, 16-year-olds that snuck in, but I'm accounting for them too now.
Yeah, most of them are in their 90s now, yeah. There's only one or two that I do see, though, on occasion. Yep.
So I guess it would, you know, if you got all of your brainwashing and information from Russia, I think you would have a problem figuring out that a death camp is a death camp, not a Holocaust center.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, how do you call a death camp a Holocaust center? I mean, did this guy not ever see any World War II movies? Did he never? I mean, give me a break. Saturday morning cartoons, even. Unless, I don't know, this cabinet seems to have people who just, even the president, he doesn't know any of this stuff, and he watches a lot of TV. I don't know, like I said, if you're getting everything from your Russian handlers, maybe you would call them Holocaust centers then. Just saying. I better get on this because we want to have a discussion with Angie. Vote by mail. Who knew? Well, you know, every time there's vote by mail in a state, you know what happens, Wink? The voting goes through the roof. More people vote than have ever voted before. It's really amazing. And that is the death knell for people who are trying to keep the total, you know, the numbers down, because if you only have your crazies voting, you could push through your crazy agenda. Well, and this is by Kira Lerner. How to Think Progress. Republican lawmakers in Montana really don't want Democrats to be able to vote for the state's next congressman. The state will elect a new at-large lawmaker to the U.S. House of Representatives in a special election on May 25th. The seat was left vacant when Trump, they use the P word here, Wink. It's hard for me to say that. Donald Trump named former Representative Ryan Zinke, there we go, not Fisk, Zinke, to lead the Department of the Interior because the election was unplanned. And not in the state's budget, lawmakers from both parties came together this year with clerks from nearly every county to recommend that the state conduct the election by mail. Well, when they say nearly every county, how many are there in Montana? 6? I mean, it's huge counties. But still. So allowing voters to cast ballots through the mail, they found, would save the state up to $750,000. Over $500,000, Wink. Well on its way to $1 million they can save for a small state like Montana. But a bitter partisan battle in the legislature, which Democrats are labeling a voter suppression tactic, has prevented the state from putting this plan into action. Now, state lawmakers have just a few days to decide if mail-in ballots will go out to voters across the state, making it significantly easier and most cost-effective for voters to select their next representative. We must certainly cut off food and aid to starving and poor women and children, Wink. We certainly must. But no expense will be spared to keep those people from getting to the voting booth. We always got money for that. Because, you know, the argument will be, well, wait a second. I thought you guys were fiscal conservatives. This is going to cost more. And they'll just say, yeah, it's just the cost of doing business. Now get back to work.
Right.
Well, this last chance comes thanks to a move by Democratic Governor Steve Bullock, who resurrected the failed effort when he inserted a vote-by-mail provision into a separate bill that the legislature can consider. The issue dates back to early this year when Republican State Senator Steve Fitzpatrick took the lead and introduced a bill to call for a mail-only election. Quote, "This bill is fiscally responsible thing to do. It's the fiscally conservative thing to do," Fitzpatrick said. And Alex said, wait, voting isn't the... We don't care about fiscal conservatism in that.
Right.
No amount will be spared. We'll spend any amount. And we do.
Republicans elected.
We don't care about losing money as long as we can keep them at bay. Not all Republicans agreed with Fitzpatrick. Just before the bill moved out of the Senate, Montana State Republican Chair Representative Jeff Essman issued an emergency report warning that vote by mail would make it easier for Democrats to cast ballots. And you know what is the bigger threat to American security? And that's Democrats. And the only way to keep them at bay is to be able to have a strong and firm alliance with Vladimir Putin. That's how they think, Wink.
Yeah.
I hear that. We are such a threat to the American way of life. These people have been brainwashed into thinking they're Rusky. And I use that term affectionately because of all the movies I've seen.
Right.
Okay, come on. That's why all those Russian bots, I used to get hammered by them, and then, I don't know, the algorithm realized, oh, it's one of those that can't be brainwashed. Damn it.
Right.
And why? Because of our liberal elitism. Coastal elitism, to be exact. It's an antidote, Wink, an antidote. Okay, when Democrats forced a vote in late March, concerned that time was running out to print mail ballots, Republicans voted along party lines to table the issue. One Republican who still supported vote by mail, Representative Geraldine Custer, a Custer in Montana? Yikes.
Wow.
Led an effort to blast the bill out of the Judiciary Committee anyway, but it failed to garner the necessary 60 votes. Now, this week, Bullock, the governor, brought the issue back into consideration when he issued a mandatory veto, essentially adding language to a separate election law bill that would allow the legislature to once again consider enacting vote by mail before time runs out ahead of the May 25th election. Neither legislative body has set a date for a vote. State Republicans, who have stopped talking to the press about the issue, may be hoping to run the clock out. But Democratic candidate Rob Quist, who hopes to win Zinke's seat in May, is encouraging his Republican opponent, Greg Gianforte, to join him in pushing the state legislature to approve the measure. And if a Democrat wants to extend his hand across the aisle, you know what happens? They not only slap your hand out of the way, they poke you in the eye and kick you in the ass. And then when you're on the ground, they start elbowing you behind the ear. Okay. Well, the Republican says that has to be left up to the legislature. And we know how they will do it. All right. Well, got to overcome that obstacle too, Wink. It never ends. Oh, my. This next article is by Bryce Covert, also out of Think Progress. As she was teaching her special education class of first through fourth graders on Monday morning in San Bernardino, California, Karen Elaine Smith was confronted by someone she knew, her estranged husband. And I'm not going to say his name, if you don't mind. According to news reports, at about 10:30 a.m., he entered her classroom and silently raised a large caliber revolver, fatally shooting Smith and hitting two nearby students. One of those students, 8-year-old Jonathan Martinez, was also killed. He then turned the gun on himself. The classroom murder horrified a community that only 2 years ago witnessed a shooting that killed 14 people. This latest murder is the 220th school shooting since 2013, But the incident on Monday is also part of a different trend. The disproportionate share of women who are murdered at work every year. Homicide is consistently one of the leading causes of workplace fatalities for female workers. Wow, way above heart attacks, alcoholism, and surprisingly much higher than even bouncing a pneumatic hammer nail through your foot and then it bouncing back up, hitting you in the head, and then you dying. And that happens a lot, surprisingly. Even falling off ladders, hod carrying bricks to the roof. But certainly, we know that funds from OSHA will be cut for that. Smith had just married the fellow in January, but according to her mother, she had recently decided to leave and divorce him. She thought she had a wonderful husband, but she found out he was not wonderful at all. He had other motives. Sykes, her mother, told the LA Times. She left him, and that's where the trouble began. She broke up with him, and he came out with a different personality. She decided she needed to leave him. She was going to divorce him. And even though he had a long history of domestic violence, a long history of even pistol whipping people, he was still able to get a gun, large caliber, because it's his constitutional right to be able to, I don't know, murder the woman he loves and then kill himself. And I'm looking at you, Wayne LaPierre. Well, it's a common pattern between 2009 and 2012. 40% of mass shootings stemmed from a man targeting his ex-partner. In 2015, a third of mass shooting deaths had ties to domestic violence. There is a variety of evidence linking violence in the home to future violent crimes. I say start with if they abuse pets, you know what's going to happen next. Some of them become cops, but the domestic violence will still be the culmination of all this. I'm just saying. Anecdotally, it proves out, and now statistically it is, Wink. Only about 15% of companies have a policy specifically addressing domestic violence. Meanwhile, it's completely illegal to fire someone for being the victim of domestic abuse in 43 states. Because when you're the victim, you might bring danger upon your workplace, and it's your fault. Yep. We live in backwards world, Wink. Backwards world.
Yeah.
Okay, this next article is out of the Texas Tribune, and it's by Julian Aguilar of the Texas Tribune. When Martin Mendez Pineda fled the Mexican state of Guerrero in February, he escaped a living hell where being a reporter meant he had a constant target on his back. Yet he walked into a new nightmare after seeking asylum in El Paso. Mendez Pineda, 26, has been in a detention facility in the Texas border city even after American authorities agree the reporter had a credible fear of returning to his country. His attorney, Carlos Spector, said it is symbolic of a change under the Trump administration where prolonged detention, even for people with no criminal history, is the latest tool in the White House's effort to discourage people fleeing violence from seeking help in the United States. Now, I might further the argument that possibly the fact he's a reporter puts him on a detention list too, because we know, Trump has already said, I'm not going to kill reporters like Putin does. No, I'm not going to do that. But he has said he'd love to lock them up, and here's his chance. Spector's immediate concern isn't the asylum process that could lay ahead, but instead the continued detention of someone who would normally be released while his case is meandering through the long and complicated series of hearings and reviews. He fears the detention and this is the lawyer for the reporter, by the way, will become a pattern and be used against other foreigners seeking safe harbor after Trump issued his January 25th executive order on immigration. And this is a mirror into their underlying ethos, Wink. They hate losers. People fleeing violence are losers. Otherwise, the violence wouldn't be perpetrated on them, right? It is an evil ethos, and I hate throwing the term evil around. It's intellectually lazy in my book. I hate the concept, to color the discussion. But I am at a loss in what to call it. It is beyond selfish. It is beyond greed. And it is also beyond the obsessive consolidation of power. I'm left with evil. I don't know what else to call it. It's dark. Dare I say, not even Christian. And yet, I don't know. We got Sessions on the border yesterday praying to God to help them deport people, poor people, people of color. To help, dear God, help us round up all of this filth. That's what he wanted to call them. He did in the printed text, the actual speech he dropped, that filth part. This is their underlying ethos. This is a mirror to their soul. Because they certainly don't use their minds very much. Their minds come afterwards, apparently, and we see that continually. The Federal Department of Homeland Security indicates it is just a vetting system, vetting asylum seekers to make sure the revamped process is fair. Now, look, we can't treat asylum refugees the same way we would, I don't know, or differently than the drug pusher. They're all criminals until proven innocent, don't you know? It's all backwards, Wink. All backwards. Okay, he entered the United States, and ICE spokeswoman Leticia Zamperera would only confirm the reporter's arrival and subsequent transfer into custody. Martin Menendez-Pineda, 26, from Mexico, entered the United States February 5th of 2017 via the Paso del Norte port of entry in El Paso, Texas, she wrote. On the same day, he was transferred to ICE custody and then was transported to the El Paso Processing Center in El Paso, Texas. And there he sits. Been there. And no criminal history. Already gone through part of the vetting process that says, yeah, we send you back, you're dead. So we can't do that. The next best thing is to pretty much put you into, this aircraft hangar type facility in chain link cages. Don't worry, you'll have some privacy. We'll give you a towel to hang up, on the chain link. Give you a little bit of privacy. Don't worry.
Okay.
All right. Links are at the show notes. And it goes into a bit more of the Kafka-esque experience this poor fellow is subjected to. And he's not alone. That's what the implication is. All right, let's get to our Jim Hightower break. We'll come back, go through the Connect Unite Act Daily Codes community calendar, and then have our discussion with Angela Marx. You are listening to the After Show on Netroots Radio with Wink and Justice, and, we will be right back.
Poor John Stumpf. The preening, silver-haired CEO of Wells Fargo sat self-assuredly atop the pecking order of the financial establishment, and he was hailed as a paragon of big banker virtue until he suddenly fell off his lofty perch. It turns out that being a paragon of big banker virtue is not at all the same as being a virtuous human being. Banker elites don't get paid the big bucks by doing what's right, but by doing what's most profitable. And that means cutting corners on ethics, common decency, and the golden rule. Stumpf didn't just cut corners, he crashed through them. devising a business plan that effectively encouraged Wells Fargo branches to steal from millions of their poorest and most easily deceived customers. The courtly chief executive coldly fostered a high-pressure sales culture, pushing elderly pensioners, non-English-speaking workers, and other vulnerable depositors into accounts they didn't understand or need, extracting high fees for the bank. One shameful and illegal profit-boosting ploy was having bank employees secretly set up fake high-fee accounts for some 2 million customers without their knowledge, much less their consent. Running such rackets for more than a decade, Wells Fargo prospered, and the chief amassed a fabulous personal fortune. Then, as the scandal went public last year, the paragon of virtue tried to save himself by firing 5,300 lower-level employees. But it wasn't enough. Stumpf was shoved out and forced to surrender $41 million in stock awards he had stashed away. This is Jim Hightower saying, but don't weep for poor John. He grabbed $83 million in stock payments on his way out last year, and he still holds another $147 million in Wells Fargo stock. It's said that virtue is its own reward, but big banker virtue is rewarded in cash.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Okay, we're back.
And indeed, we are back, and thank you for sticking with us. This is the After Show with Wink and Justice. Justice here along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the West Coast. Wink is in upstate New York, 21 on the East Coast. Angie in Washington State is safely secured in Washington State. And our crew are the ethereal creatures who reside in the cloud, whose advanced intergalactic technical abilities allow Netroots Radio, and thus by extension the After Show, to span the globe, the solar system, out past the Oort cloud, and beyond. Okay. Beyond hyperbole. Even beyond that. Okay. Today's Connect, Unite, Act Daily Co's community diary is facilitated by Forrest Bob, and he opens the diary today with cat idioms. You know, like conceited as a barber's cat, and he gives definitions for those. I don't know. The only cat idioms that I don't know, I will cotton to would probably be cool cats and hot kitties. And there you go. I don't know. I'm a man of a certain age, and I don't mean it in a bad way.
Something like that.
Damn. All right. Events currently scheduled. Let's see. New York City Cossacks first up here are meeting on Sunday, April 23rd, because Navajos is going to be in town. And they always meet up at Spitzer's Corner 101, Rivington Street. The cross street is Ludlow, because it is in the Ludlow district, of course. And they will be meeting at high noon. Cosmail Navajo to RSVP. It looks like they need a couple of tables again. Now, the date has changed for the New England Cossacks meetup. Let's see original diary for an update. But will this take me to a new window or not? I guess I'll just do it. All right, here we go. What? This goes way back. Okay, I let's see. Due to uncontrollable circumstance, we need to change the meetup date to Saturday, April 29th. Okay. All the other details remain the same. So that is what it is. They'll be meeting up on Saturday, April 29th at noon at Flatbread Pizza in Portland, Maine. And Cosmail and Hawks 42 to RSVP for a seat. And then the People's Climate March that will be occurring on April 29th. And there are sister marches throughout the nation. And there are too numerous to go through specifically right now. So go to the Connect Unite Act Daily Coast Community Diary for proper links to meet up with the marches in your area. The Epic Glacier National Park meetup facilitated or planned and taken or led by Thinking Fella and Ojibwa will be occurring June 30th through July 2nd. And there is an important diary for important planning details. Get a hold of Ojibwa and Thinking Fella to attend that. And, of course, the Cheers and Jeers annual dinner at Netroots Nation in Atlanta this year will be occurring on Wednesday, August 9th at 5:30 p.m. and location to be determined. Cosmail Navajo to RSVP a seat. Once again, that will determine how large of a venue she gets. And pretty soon, they're going to have the largest one available, and it will only be third-rate karaoke available for you. And you don't want to go to third-rate karaoke in Atlanta. You want to go to live music, and they're all going to be filled up because you can't get into the Cheers and Cheers dinner.
Yeah.
So, get a hold of her now. And that is your Connect Unite Act Daily Coast Community Calendar for the 12th of April of 2017. Wow. Time marches on. Well, when we were talking during the break, behind the curtain, we were marveling about how wonderful life is, and that we're alive for any number of reasons. And Angie, we're alive again.
yeah.
Now, I was actually trying to do a quick research to figure out when I jokingly mentioned ICBM flight times from Korea to here, because they're a little bit different from here to there. And I got to tell you, even in Jane's, I need a little bit more time to search it out. But I suppose we could hope that they don't have a missile that can get this far.
Well,
but hope isn't enough, especially when you agitate them.
They only have 6 launchers for ICBMs, actually. We don't know if they even have a ICBM capable. That's intercontinental ballistic missiles, for those of you that didn't live through the Cold War. But I was reading, I think in the Atlantic or something, that they only have 6 launchers, but we don't really know if they actually have an ICBM-capable missile yet. We know they have some other kinds because they've been splashing them down in the Western Pacific there recently.
Now, of course, we also know that if you can move your platform, it makes it seem like you have more. What I was able to find out is that their submarine force seems rather wan. Yet China has a lot of submarines, and they're willing to sell old ones to them.
We did that back in the day. In fact, it's one of the ways that President Eisenhower got Congress to fund the interstate highway system was because he said they were going to put ICBMs on mobile launchers and keep them moving around the country so the Russians wouldn't know how many we had or where they were or when we would be able to drop them on their
highway system was national defense.
Yeah.
So we kind of joke around about that, but the real reason we're kind of joking around is that every new administration is going to be tested in some way. We already know that. And I don't know, do we look at this carrier strike force going into, and I hate this, they're calling it the Korean Sea. Now, am I being an imperialist for continuing to call it the Japanese Sea? Or the Sea of Japan?
I don't think it's a sea. I think that's just the Pacific at that point, isn't it? It's It's outside the South China Sea,
right?
Border, right? And it's
but
not
they're steaming towards there now.
Japan, but
now this could be considered an act of provocation, or it could be considered. I'm hoping cooler military heads are involved in this.
I read yesterday that this particular strike force is on, quote, regular scheduled maneuvers, unquote, right. Meaning that they were planning to go have some actual training, something in that particular area already, which seems kind of coincidental since North Korea splashed down a missile test like 11 or 12 days ago near Japan. And then there are 50 Tomahawk missiles flying into Syria with no prior notice, no congressional approval. And the very next day, the news that strike force would head to the Korean Peninsula. These do not seem like coincidences to me. They seem like, dots on a map. Bad, scary map.
Actually, they don't need to send those ICBMs very far, because if they really wanted to make a statement, there's a country just to the south of them with the same name. And that is where the great fear is, because does the provocation lead to something like that? And then we're in big trouble.
That's right, because North Korea, much like North Vietnam a couple of generations ago, or a couple decades ago, I mean, feels that South Korea is not really South Korea. It's just a kind of unfinished secession from Korea. North Korea doesn't see South Korea as a separate country. They say that, that's still part of our country. We just haven't officially got it back yet. The same way North Vietnam talked about South Vietnam during the American-Vietnamese War. It's really crazy because, very few people understand that the people in North Korea are so isolated from the rest of the world that most people in Korea actually believe that Kim Jong-un is like a god come to life on Earth. No joke.
Yep.
Right? It's a crazy theocratic dictatorship, and people there have starved to death by the millions, just like in Stalin's Russia, but you don't really hear much about any of that because they have a lot of weapons.
And of course, my romantic notions of diplomacy was always put to an intellectual test, when I would work these scenarios out in my mind. Korea was one of the most difficult to wrap my brain around because of its self-imposed isolation and almost like old school, historically authoritarian in the way of the warlords and the serfs and vassals, and it's just out of our time almost, yet the technology to be able to wreak havoc is present. And so offering, to build schools or to, have some sort of trade on food, wouldn't work because of this autocratic paranoia.
The truth is, North Korea should be a mirror that we hold up to the Republicans in this country and say, look here, people, this is the nation that you want to build. You want to build a giant wall around the country and isolate it from the rest of the world, and you want everyone to follow exacting rules that follow your complete ideology right down to the letter. That's what you're trying to build in this country.
That is interesting.
I'm not even joking. I'm totally serious. It is a frightening future for our nation unless people in this country really start taking a look at where the Republicans have been trying to send the nation for the last 35 to 40 years. Look at Trump. He's a complete isolationist. That lunatic wants to spend billions of dollars building a 30-foot wall on our southern border while we leave both coastlines and the northern border completely open. That is insanity times 10.
Well, it's born out of, obviously, it's born out of bigotry and racism. I mean, Mexico represents brown people and Canada doesn't, I guess.
the world is hard enough to grasp these days for most people because it's far too complex. Technology, contrary to the ideas of the middle of the last century, has not really made life easier for anybody. It's just made it more, it's harder to grasp anything. Mm-hmm. Because I remember when I was a kid, before the era of computers, before the era of color TVs, I'm that old, life was a lot simpler. People didn't have to know and remember so many things to survive life back then. I think that's part of it. I bet in future decades we'll find that's part of the trend for the reducing lifespan of Americans of a certain age, because stress is a killer, and life is nothing but stress anymore.
I might argue that maybe specialization and then the volume of knowledge to exist within that specialization, and then confronted with all of the other aspects of what it is to be alive, like paying your bills and getting your kids to school on time, that it becomes overwhelming. I've always been a proponent for not specializing necessarily, and then you're able to process much more. But then you run up against that old idiom of a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. So
exactly. That quote is a perfect example of how language is so important, because most people hear that and they think, "Oh, that's so funny." But the actual quote itself means that if you only have a little knowledge, you are dangerous.
Right.
People with much knowledge are not so dangerous.
So it is, well, we can't know where but this is where the idea of a community comes into play. And I think this is why we are in the democratic part of our political spectrum, is that we can't, as individuals, know everything. But as neighbors, we can resource amongst each other. And, Joe down the block, knows how to put something together where someone else doesn't. And someone else knows how to resource to be able to get materials where it's difficult for another person. And then that's how we move forward, I suppose. Versus the idea of the rugged individualist who has to do it all. So that's a romantic notion, the rugged individualist. But even the rugged individualist, you'll notice, had to be in a community. Even though it may be far flung in the mountains in Utah, there was still a community there.
That's right. Civilization is built by the acts of a million little people, right?
Right.
Not one person alone can't survive, because they just can't do all the jobs it takes to be living a civilized life. It's the one big thing that the conservatives and the right in this country miss completely when they talk about capitalism and picking yourself up by your bootstraps. In a civilized country, the only way to have civilization is for everybody to pitch together to pay for certain things, to create a certain standard of living, so that people can then create a greater society built on that foundation. The Republicans seem to think that the foundation is going to exist no matter what, and they just take it for granted. But when they give tax breaks to giant corporations that are mature industries and strip money from programs that produce actual improvements in the lives of hundreds of thousands or even millions of people, they don't see that as a step backwards. They see it as jobs creating. The older I get, the harder it is for me to understand how those people on that side of the ideological fence, how their brain works. Because to me, it's completely illogical.
I'm coming to a conclusion, and yes, it's completely illogical by our standards of logic, which I kind of think is borne out by the way the universe exists right now, as well as we can understand that. But they value subterfuge, and I think that is embodied in the subject I wanted to talk about with Mick Mulvaney. I mentioned during the body of the show that I've always had a hard time intellectually throwing off terms like that person is evil or this thing is evil, because it just seems to me to be intellectually lazy. But I am bumped up against a wall to describe what is going on here in any other language but the term evil. And so you have this Mick Mulvaney who gleefully went on the news and said, yeah, I was able to fool Trump because he doesn't know anything about this program, and I was able to get him to cut this Appalachian program. and was going to hurt his own base, but people got to suffer. And he was smiling when he said it. And
later in that interview, he talks about how he wants to cut disability payments to Social Security recipients.
Yeah, because it's a perpetual unemployment machine. What the hell?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that is evil to me. And I want to call it something else, but it's I'm being lazy now.
Can you imagine even 20 years ago, a White House budget director being gleeful in a public interview on the broadcast airwaves about the fact that the president he was serving was an idiot, and that's how he got him to cut programs? Doesn't that seem unimaginable even 20 years ago?
Well, see, that this idiom of a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, because if someone is recognized of only having a little knowledge, it can be easily manipulated, especially with an egoist like Trump. Because all Mulvaney had to do was stroke his ego and say, you're doing the right thing, it'll be great. And Trump never took the next. This way, he owned a small family branding business. This guy's no great CEO because he never asked the next question. And that would have been, well, what's going to happen tomorrow when I do this?
I have to wonder, I don't know. A lot of people say, I don't understand how Trump got elected. I know how he got elected. Have you ever bought a car from a used car salesman? I've known used car salesmen now. I'm not jabbing the entire field of people who work in that industry because they have a job to do, right? But it's the same way that snake oil salesmen sold people toxic poisons 115 years ago in this country because they have the gift of gab. Trump, I don't particularly think he's a very intelligent person. I've listened to him talk now. The media forced me to listen to him talk endlessly for hours and months and years now, it seems like, in an alternate reality. But he has definitely got that con man grifter gab down to a T. He uses no definite words. He doesn't really describe any ideology. He's just a brutish, brash con artist. I mean, there's just no way around it.
Yeah, it's all about I can get it done. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about the details. I got it. Of course, he doesn't worry about the details either.
And I would venture to say that it's more my experience, because I have relatives in the auto business, used car business, and new dealership business, and I got to tell you, I have no problem calling them snakes. I could never understand how come my brother has such a shitty attitude about life, and I sat with him for a few weeks while he did business. And everybody's a backstabber. I was like, no wonder he thinks the way he does, because he thinks that everybody is out to screw everybody else. And I come from this like artisans and artists and chefs, and everybody's trying to help each other, right? And so I'm thinking, well, who's right? He's rich. I'm not. And it is, but I was going to say my experience further is that Trump is more in the commercial real estate realm, where it is really corrupt. But even in that, he's not. He doesn't have the wherewithal for that. That's why he got into branding.
Well, the real estate business isn't just that it's corrupt. That's a side issue.
Well, I'm talking commercial real estate rather than residential, which has its own attendant problems.
No,
commercial
it's the
real
same.
estate.
I was a realtor, and I knew commercial brokers too.
Right.
I'm telling you, for real estate, it's exactly like used car salesmen, except that the product that they're selling costs a whole lot more.
Right. Takes less units when you're a real estate.
It's the same thing, though. Yep. Right? Because for a realtor and a used car salesman, it's the same thing. You have to polish that apple as hard as you can to sell it, and never turn it over so the little ding spots on the bottom show, right? It's just a show. It's to deflect people's attention from anything that might dissuade them from opening their pocketbook and shoveling money your way.
Yeah.
But for me, the issue with Trump, as horrible and bad as it is with him in the White House and the craziness that's going on the few months he's been president, isn't the danger. The danger is that we have now elected a reality TV star for president. So what are we going to get next from the Republicans? That's the problem.
And
if enough people in this country would elect this joker, who would they put in that office the next time around?
Of course, I don't know. I might be jumping ahead and putting on the tinfoil hat too much, but was he really elected? So,
exactly.
meaning that there's and I don't really want to get in there because it's too much like conspiracy theory stuff. Because there has been the argument all along, well, they never hacked into our election systems. And now hackers that they arrested in Spain and elsewhere have actually made some comments that that's indeed what they did. And they weren't able to do it on a vast scale, but they were able to do it on county and city levels, and that can be enough.
Here's the problem. Even if we find definite proof that they got into voting machinery and messed with the numbers and that Trump was actually not elected by the standards of our system, the U.S. Constitution provides no way to recall a president or redo a presidential election. The only way to get him out is for him to resign or for Congress to impeach him. That's it. I've talked to lots of people. People think that you could, if the president gained the seat illegally somehow, if they gamed the system and it's proven that they did criminal activity to get him elected even, the Constitution does not provide any way to force him out of the office other than Congress impeaching him.
And that comes
Can you
up
imagine this Republican Congress giving that guy up at this point? I can't.
No,
but
that does beg the next, and instead of speaking about chocolate cake, because we've sort of addressed that issue already about a know-nothing president, but let's speak about how we can attend to that, because there is no constitutional resolution in being able to recall a president other than voting him out or getting him impeached. I think that what happened in Kansas last night portends something big and a change. And what can happen in Georgia next week, and then it's not very much. When we're deluged with all this bad news, well, Montana too. But I'm just saying that by the time the midterms come, it doesn't seem like that long from now, though. When we're deluged daily by this craziness, it will seem like.
Let's hope the Republicans see these special elections the same way the Democrats saw Senator Brown get elected to replace Ted Kennedy in Massachusetts back in 2009. Right? We saw that happen and people went, meh, nothing. But what happened the next year in 2010? Republicans took a crap load of seats from the Democrats. It was darn near a wave election. It was big.
Think about what they had to do.
And nobody noticed, right?
Think about what they had to do that, though. I mean, we're talking about Freedom Works and Americans for Prosperity, the Kochs, Petersons. I would think even the Mercers, though they were less, they had to bus people in.
And today, the left and the Democrats have the Indivisible movement.
Yes.
They have the Black Lives Matter movement. They have the women's movement, which was evidenced by the massive number of people that turned out, about 4 million people, the day of the Women's March in Washington on January 17th, I believe. The Democratic left base in this country, they finally activated. The Republicans did so much for so long, it finally got people up off their sofas and out in front of their congressman's office. And my Republican congresswoman, Jamie Herrera Butler, here in the 3rd District in Washington State, she's a Tea Party from way back when. She went to college for poli-sci. She served in John Boehner's office for a while. Then she went to work for Kathy McMorris Rogers. Then she came back to Washington State and worked for Kathy McMorris Rogers. Then Kathy McMorris Rogers got her appointed to a seat that a Republican had to resign because of a sex scandal. And then they helped her win this congressional seat that she's in, right? She is a Tea Partier from the get-go. She votes 95% with Trump all the time. The day before they had the vote, we're supposed to have the vote on the AHCA, which is the crazy Republican replacement plan for Obamacare. She put out a message after we had deluged her with calls and events outside, protesters outside of her single congressional office that she has locally here in the state. The day before, she sent out a press release saying that she could not vote yes on that bill. She votes 95% with Trump and the Republicans over the last 3 terms she's had. So lots of Republicans did that. They were so scared they couldn't even hold a vote on that. Did you see Paul Ryan's face when he had to pull that bill?
Yep.
Oh,
what happened in Kansas last night, being able to come so close. I mean, we have to look at that as a win. And it does portend something vast. And that's why it's scary for the Kochs, the Petersons, the Republican Party, is because they have to put in resources and strategy in which to be able to affect this supposed populist movement. And yet they're now up against things that just are happening. People are pissed.
For 30 years, that rich right side sent money into the political system and made changes because of all of their money. Because our side sat quietly and did nothing, basically. We just kept voting for the same people and nothing changed. But an active left base that's getting out of their house, that's going to events, that's contacting their elected representatives on a regular basis, and if they keep that up from now until the election cycle next year, if that doesn't diminish, all the money in the world won't help those Republicans, because the only reason money helped them before was because it helped depress the vote. Voting participation rates in the United States is pitiful. In the last 100 years, it's never breached 65% participation in any election, including popular presidential races. 65% is more than we ever reach. So barely over half of people in this country ever vote.
Yep,
if 80% of people turned out on our side for the midterms next year, we would sweep the Republicans from the face of politics. That's not even a joke. It's that simple. If people just exercised their franchise and voted, they could change the way our country works overnight. It's a crazy secret, and it's not even a secret.
It's not even a secret. Well, we're going to have to carry this conversation on next week, Angie. We're running out of time, so we'll catch up with you next week.
Yes.
All right. You guys have a great week.
All right, folks. You too. All right, we got to bug out of here before Hartman comes up about 6 minutes after the hour. We'll be listening to Jihan and Kamian's Home Base. And stay tuned, of course, through the rest of the day. But tonight is Jibber Your Jabber with Wink. And that begins at 9 p.m. on the West Coast, midnight on the East Coast, a 2-hour opportunity for live call-in radio. And so do that. And as I mentioned, stay tuned to Netroots Radio 24/7, 365. Why? Because who loves you, baby? Oh, Wink, one more thing. I'll see you on the other side.
Yeah. And we're out.